they won games down double digits against above 500 teams? That to me would be an interesting question, because then that would answer your question right now of whether or not we need to be here for another 12 more minutes, or it's time we make sure we get our plugs in. And call it
and go
call
to
it
bed
a night.
and lay it down. Nah, I feel you on that, and yeah, we would definitely, I'd want to look that up and really see what that situation is. I think if I may, I think just there's been so many. It's probably the opposite for Boston. I think where they've had double-digit leads and blown them, as opposed to coming back from double-digit leads. And there's been a couple where they've come back but they haven't won. I think most recently against Milwaukee, that was a game that was on, I think, ESPN. A couple of weeks ago, they ended up beating Milwaukee, 2 nights later or whatever on a Friday night. But basically right before the trade deadline, remember? And Tice missed a corner three, but Boston was down, I think, as much as 27 or something ridiculous in that game in the third quarter, and then fought all the way back just to lose it on a Tice, corner three that didn't go in, or whatever the case would be. But it's funny because the requisite fight that has been known in previous iterations of Brad Stevens' Boston Celtics-led teams is not there. They're almost like this too cool for school prima donna, version of themselves now. And when it starts to go, and we started to see this ish in the bubble, like if things started to go bad, they didn't know how to fight out of it, or they couldn't fight all their way out. And the old adage in the NBA or in basketball in general was like, yeah, when you get down big, it takes so much energy to get back that you usually can't come all the way back from it. And they just continue to dig themselves into holes. I think they had 12 turnovers in the first half tonight, which is not necessarily characteristic of them, but also credit to Philadelphia's great defense. But they just look bad against some of the better teams out there.
A few of those turnovers, Shaw, are contagious trends. Like I saw Marcus Smart, you try to look. I love Marcus Smart, man, but Marcus Smart ain't Chris Paul, and so don't be throwing the ball around like you think you Chris Paul, right? Trying to fancy pass, and you wind up turning the ball over. Again, outside of themselves is the tendency at times when the Celtics play against the Sixers. And I'm going to speak to something else that I want, if Celtics fans catch where I'm coming from, don't take this personally. Don't take this as a diss. This is just my personal opinion. But the Boston Celtics, to me, I think have played themselves when they've had these opportunities in competing against the Sixers, allowing themselves to think, hey, we've beaten the Sixers, in the regular season. Last year we swept them, in the playoff bubble, right? We should always be confident in every time that we're playing them. I'm never saying don't be confident when you come in and you play against the Sixers. If you've proven you've beaten them, always know that but also recognize the caliber of players that are a part of that team. Don't just assume that they're going to stay the same type of player. It's usually when when a team like the Celtics sweep the Philadelphia 76ers, your expectations that great players like Ben Simmons and like Joel Embiid want to come back the next year and put your ass in the tool shed and show you how they work them tools, right, against you. And you have to think in that kind of manner, right? Like, even if the whole idea is they may not beat you, they're going to make sure that you look ugly as F, right, when you play against us, right? They'll make it as ugly as possible. They'll make you look bad if it's at the expense that they can't beat you. That's how teams that feel desperate to want to win act, right? And so I think part of the problem that I tend to see at times with the Boston Celtics are maybe they have this one little run where they actually look effective and they look good, but they never seem to elevate themselves more out of just that, that paranoia thought process, right? Like that's how Michael Jordan thought, right? Michael Jordan was a paranoid, great player. He never wanted another player to get shine on whatever he put on the floor, right? So even at times he would psych himself out. He basically be talking to himself. He's like, I heard you talking shit. And they're like, I never said nothing to Michael Jordan. He's like, well, I thought he said it, so I went and I whooped his ass.
He's like, you thought it. That's how Mike was. It's like, you thought it, so now you have to catch this. You have to catch this L. And and like I said, it's an interesting situation. I think this game it's rough. If from the Celtics standpoint, but focusing a little bit more on Philadelphia here. I guess my next question for you, and I guess we'll do a couple more minutes because it does look like it's going to be kind of a rough one here to power through. The Ben Simmons angle. Just, it's been talked about ad nauseum. Me, I've kind of like, listen, I don't want to talk about what he doesn't do anymore as much as what he can do. With Embiid playing at the level that we've outlined earlier on. They are supposedly getting George Hill soon, who's still on the men, kind of come back and maybe help them give some more ball facilitation, some defense, and some three-point shooting as well. But can they get it done? Is this year, like, have they shown you enough to this point where you're no longer, all right, sketchy about Philadelphia's playoff chances right now with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid at the helm?
I'm going to answer your question by not answering your question. Right, exactly. When the Philadelphia 76ers, and maybe this is the reason why Doc Rivers is probably the perfect hire in this situation right now for the 76ers. I didn't even think about this until you brought up this point. If Doc Rivers is the only person that sees Ben Simmons as his Rajon Rondo, we will all come around to that sentiment soon enough, right? The Boston Celtics were a really good basketball team, and a lot of people were playing on the hype back in 2008 of the greatness combination of Garnett, Allen, and Pierce, okay? But the key to them winning that championship and the key for them being competitive during those quote-unquote highlight years of what was left of Garnett and Pierce and Allen was because of Rajon Rondo. And people do not want to give credit to Rondo for actually having to step up when he was basically a rookie. He was only, a year or two removed in the game to play next those type players and help situate that Celtics team to win a championship. So the reason why I brought all of that up is because everything feels like it's coming full circle again. And we might be revisiting Ubuntu in Philly if Doc Rivers sees Ben Simmons as his Rajon Rondo. And if Ben Simmons sees himself in a way like Rajon Rondo, where he lets his basketball IQ take over rather than allowing the noise about him not being able to shoot the basketball to hinder him. If Elton Brand has gone out of his way and gotten you shooters, what that basically means is Elton Brand is talking to Ben Simmons like, stop worrying about shooting the damn ball. Get the ball to everybody else. Be the play creator that this team needs to be. Be the mismatch that this team needs when the rest of the other guys can't get you those buckets. You see what I'm saying? Because you can use that 6'10" down in the blocks. So to your point, Shaw, I think the moment that Ben Simmons recognizes what he really can be to the Philadelphia 76ers, quote unquote, in that Rajon Rondo space, is the moment that we probably will start seeing the Philadelphia 76ers elevate to an Eastern Conference Finals and possible finals.
Well, I'll add one thing to what you said about Simmons there. The focus always is what he does or doesn't do offensively. And he's an elite level defender who can guard roughly 4 positions. So I think as he looks for the next phase of his overall development, he wants to be Defensive Player of the Year. There was some randomness that came out a week or two ago where he kind of went at Rudy Gobert or something like that. And he was like, well, Gobert's kind of one-dimensional defensively. And Simmons realizes the value he brings on that side of the basketball. So Doc having the ability to just say, go get him, go get that guy defensively, where he can then force potentially turnovers and get out on the break. And then that's where he can get his own offense and get some layups and things like that. I think that's probably right now at this stage his most valuable trait next to maybe his play creation and passing. But the fact that he's an elite level defender is massive for what the Sixers want to do as they look to be a championship level team. And that you just can't have enough of those types of guys on your team Even if, and especially a guy who can still get to the rim. But if he's not shooting threes, all right. But I think he's doing enough to make this team, contenders, and to get them to where they ultimately want to go. So I'm definitely on that. Hey, let's focus on what Ben can do and not what he can.
Absolutely. And I want to add to another point that you were just making in relation to Ben Simmons as it pertains to guys like Tobias Harris and guys like Seth Curry and guys, like Matisse Thybulle. The reason why we're talking about whether or not Joel Embiid is MVP worthy, right, is because, again, everyone's going to look at Embiid's individual numbers and they're going to highlight and emphasize, in comparison to what the other guys are, that are in MVP conversations are doing, is it enough, right? I'm trying to use a different metric to emphasize, where I am at times on board with Embiid and where I come off board with Embiid. It's what the other guys on that team do when Embiid has to focus on one end of the basketball court, right? So, in other words, he may not have an effective shooting night, right? But it may be because his concentration really needs to be on the defensive side of the ball, which is what Doc Rivers normally asks of his quality star players because he finds that he has that balance of both. So guys like Tobias Harris and guys like Seth Curry and guys like Danny Green and all of these guys, they have to be effective in recognizing that while the numbers don't reflect a dominant performance comparatively to what other guys in the MVP conversation are doing, what Embiid is basically doing for the Philadelphia 76ers is dominating in itself, right? Because we could be talking about two of the best defensive teams in the NBA possibly playing against each other in the finals. If it comes down to being if a fully healthy Los Angeles Lakers team and a fully healthy Philadelphia 76ers team, right? And I would venture to argue, where will your confidence be in a matchup between Embiid and Anthony Davis from a defensive perspective? You get what I'm saying? Where would your confidence be in a matchup between LeBron James and Ben Simmons? You get where I'm coming from? So that to me is where it really stands out to me about saying, does MVP conversations really need to swirl around Joel Embiid? I know what he can do offensively when his mind is right, but I've often said when he brings it defensively as well too, when he chooses to be the best big man in the game defending, then the Philadelphia 76ers are going to be a problem for anyone in the NBA. And I don't know whether or not we have yet to have completely seen that. Because at times when we want to see Embiid on the basketball court against those type of teams that could cause those problems, he's either been injured or the 76ers have not been effective. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays.
Well said. So why don't we go ahead and take one final break here? I think we'll run out here to the 4 or 5 minute mark of this game to kind of see where it lands here. So we'll be right back. We're going to take another short break. And then we'll finish this thing off here on our first live baseline stream here on the Hot Mic platform. We'll be right back. 276 if you're synced up with me here on the Hot Mic platform. Philadelphia leads with 6:38. We're going to take you up until about the 5-minute mark unless something miraculous happens in this next minute and 38 seconds or Boston tries to make it back. But I think what we want everybody to know is that, hey, we're going to try to do this thing on a regular basis, right? Like, we're going to try to do this Tuesday night live with the baseline. TNT games. We'll probably continue to do second halves or maybe like final quarters as to kind of keep it interesting, because we don't want to just be rambling and talking about everything. Although you may love us, you may not. But we want to make sure we can give you the content that is what you're looking for, with what we're doing here as well. And we're very thankful to the Hot Mic platform for this opportunity to be ambassadors along this road and to give you all some opportunities to win some cash, some prizes. And we're going to do a lot of different polls and things of that nature as well too. So rock with us. First one, we're getting our feet wet a little bit here, but we're definitely going to be up in this thing, for the last coming months here of the NBA season on Tuesday nights, and the future games on TNT, Cal. So what you think about that, my dude?
I really like it. Shout outs to Hot Mic. Yes, we do the shameless plugs. We have no problem with doing that. But I think Hot Mic is an excellent opportunity and platform that's really going to give us a chance to kind of flex our podcasting muscles a little bit, but at the same time as well too allow us some opportunities to do some interaction with some of our listeners and also with new people who just want to catch a different perspective of how we watch and stream the games. We're all about that, being a watch party type of thing, but we certainly want to extend ourselves out more. And this is a great opportunity for us to be able to do that. So we definitely want, any of our listeners, but also just people in general, man, who are looking for a new and interesting way for you to watch the games, especially as we get a little bit closer to NBA playoffs. Oh, I mean, I can't tell you, Shaw. I mean, if this thing is popping the way that we're expecting it to be popping, we're going to have a lot of interesting conversations, through the course of some of these, playoff series. So I'm really, really, excited about that aspect and that opportunity.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, keeping it a buck. And, I think it'll give us some greater visibility to some of our fans, listeners, some people who we know, virtually, but maybe we'll be able to bring them on to the feed and they can ask and interact with us live. Shout out to our guy, Matt, here, really supporting the podcast from literally, like, it seems like day one. Has a couple of our shirts, the whole nine, and, kind of talking offline. We need to have him be our statistician, have him ready to rock. When we're not sure about a stat, it looks like he's ready to kind of hit us up right quick and chime in the chat. So we're appreciative of that, and appreciative of all the people who rock with us on the baseline. If you've been with us, we've been doing this thing we're closing in on a decade of podcasting, which is kind of crazy when you come think about it. And, not to get like we're signing off, like, this isn't a swan song. It's really just the beginning.
I should have responded like how you respond to me when I come up with a certain line in our show. But whoa, what are you trying to say? Whoa, you trying to kill us all? Whoa. Sorry.
Nah, man, we not dead yet, yo. We just beginning. And so, we want to say shout out to Hot Mic one more time. Facts. It is autopsy, and right now the Celtics are looking pretty dead, down 16 with 4:33 left. Philadelphia with a dominant showing. Embiid just hit a dribble step back from the wing, looking like James Harden out here. It wasn't a three, but the step back jumper. I think it's 99 here for Boston. So
do you think that Brad Stevens
continuing their winning
in here just for punishment? He's like, y'all are going to take this L for the full 48, right? Like,
it's still only 15, but the writing's on the wall here. So we're going to go ahead and sign off to all ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for rocking with us here on Hot Mic. For those of you who might have joined us on YouTube as well. Again, it's just the beginning. Go ahead.
Listeners, for those that, who haven't listened to our show, please go to www.thebaselinenba.com so you can catch our episodes, our previous episodes, our guests, all of that stuff, man. Go to our home website, man, so you can catch the full gamut and array of our podcast shows. You may proceed.
Yeah, podcast dropping probably tomorrow-ish, maybe sometime. New episode, pretty fire. We just talked about, the Lakers and Nets rather, where they're kind of at right now in terms of all the injuries that they're dealing with. Steph Curry. We had to talk about that Paul Pierce, Mr. IG Live and what he had going on as well. So stay tuned. That episode will drop. But as
did
I
you know
alluded
that?
to,
Did you know that OnlyFans is willing to pay him $250? I'm sorry. I know that was a joke, but still, man, that probably was the funniest joke I think I'd seen on the gram or on the memes. They were going to pay him $250,000 for him to do whatever he wanted.
But
to analyze NBA games with strippers.
There's no shame in the porn industry. I'll tell you that. Because didn't like Pornhub or one of them sites offer the Nets? They tried to be a sponsor when they heard James Harden was coming, so they were trying to make sure like, hey, you'll be a frequent visitor of our of our site or our clubs and things of that nature. So there's no shame. Everything is about trying to make money nowadays.
I will say this.
It's kind of wild.
I will say this though, man. If the stripper industry, I think should probably feel a little salty though. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't blame the stripper industry for Paul Pierce losing his job. That's Paul Pierce, right? There's a code to these things, man. Paul Pierce, he just acted like he could just do whatever he wanted to do and it not suffer the repercussions of his actions. Man, people need to be like, lay off the stripper industry, man. Like, it wasn't their fault that Paul Pierce put them in the pickle.
They're doing what they do,
right? Like, the whole idea is to get money from Paul Pierce. That's exactly what they did. So,
we'll see what Paul Pierce means when he's on to bigger and better things. But stay tuned to more hot takes on the Paul Pierce situation on the next Baseline NBA podcast, dropping later this week. So I'm Warren Shaw. That's Kyle Lee for the Baseline NBA podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on our first ever hot mic stream. We'll be back with you next Tuesday, and we'll let you know exactly how we're going to rock with it. Second half, fourth quarter, we don't know yet. We're going to keep these things fluid. But thank you so much for joining us. We'll catch you next week.